All right, welcome everyone to today's Explainer. We are going to map out an absolutely incredible system today. I want you to think of the human body not just as a bunch of organs, but as this highly organized, interconnected economy. Now, normally this economy runs on glucose, right? But what happens when that food supply abruptly stops? How does the body actually keep the lights on in our most vital organs when its primary fuel source just completely dries up? Well, today we're breaking down the systemic regulation of ketogenesis and ketolysis. We're going to track exactly how the body pivots, literally shifting its entire energy infrastructure to unlock a super powerful alternative fuel source. It is an absolute marvel of metabolic engineering, so let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. First, we'll look at the fasting energy trigger. 2. Unlocking fat for fuel. 3. The liver's ketone factory. 4. Powering the brain and heart. And finally, distinguishing between normal ketosis and ketoacidosis.
Section 1. The fasting energy trigger. Let's look at the hormonal shift. So think about your body in two completely different metabolic states. In the fed state, right after a meal, glucose and insulin are high, and that insulin is actively suppressing fat breakdown and halting ketone production. And well, that makes perfect sense, right? You have plenty of glucose on hand, so you just don't need emergency backup power. But on the flip side, when you fast or maybe adopt a very low carbohydrate diet, your glucose drops. Consequently, your insulin plummets and another hormone, glucagon, surges. This sharp drop in insulin mixed with that spike in glucagon, that is the ultimate biochemical memo sent to literally every cell in your body. It's basically shouting, hey, primary fuel is gone, switch to the backup reserves.
Moving on to Section 2, unlocking fat for fuel, accessing those reserves.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we actually open up that savings account. Meet hormone-sensitive lipase, or HSL for short. This enzyme lives right in your fat tissue, and it is the literal key that unlocks your fat stores. Remember a second ago how we said insulin suppresses fat breakdown? Well, it does that by slamming the brakes on HSL. But when insulin falls away during a fast and glucagon and catecholamines rise, HSL is activated. The brakes come off, and this enzyme just starts aggressively breaking down your stored fat.
It all starts with stored triglycerides. That's how fat is packed away in your tissue. HSL gets to work breaking those down into free fatty acids. So now we've got raw fuel. That raw material gets dumped straight into the bloodstream and shipped off to the body's central manufacturing plant, the liver.
Which brings us to Section 3, the liver's ketone factory. Let's manufacture some fuel.
The process that kicks off next is called ketogenesis. So those free fatty acids have arrived from the fat tissue and entered the liver's mitochondria. Once inside, they undergo a process called beta oxidation, breaking down into a molecule called acetyl-CoA, which is then finally converted into ketone bodies. Now you might be wondering, why go through all this trouble? Because raw free fatty acids can't actually be used by every organ, especially the brain. Basically, the liver is taking this raw crude oil and refining it into easily transportable gasoline. To do this, glucagon flips the switch on some heavy machinery. You've got CPT1 ramping up the initial breakdown, followed by HMG-CoA synthase and lyase directly driving the ketone creation. It's really like this highly coordinated assembly line, just working at maximum capacity to save the body from a total energy crisis.
And here are the final products rolling off that assembly line. The liver produces two main ketone bodies, acetoacetate and beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB for short. Now, unlike acetyl-CoA, which kind of gets stuck inside cells, these newly minted ketone bodies are special. Because they're highly water-soluble, they can travel freely anywhere in your bloodstream to get to the organs that need them the absolute most.
Section 4, powering the brain and heart. Let's look at fuel consumption.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is a biological riddle. The liver just did all this heavy lifting to produce these beautiful ketone bodies, right? Yet it absolutely cannot use them for its own energy. Why in the world would the body design a system like that?
Well, it turns out the liver is missing a very specific enzyme called SCOT. Without it, the liver is physically incapable of burning ketones. It's actually a brilliant evolutionary safeguard. It ensures the liver doesn't selfishly consume all that precious energy before it reaches the brain. The liver is acting purely as an energy provider for the rest of the body.
So the ketones travel through the blood to our power-hungry consumers, the brain, the heart, and the skeletal muscles. And guess what? These tissues do have that CODTOSC enzyme. When the ketones arrive, ketolysis begins. BHB is converted back to acetoacetate, and thanks to that crucial CODTOSC enzyme, back into acetyl-CoA. It enters the cellular engine, and boom, ATP is produced. Usable, life-sustaining energy. Your brain keeps thinking, your heart keeps beating, and it's all being powered by your stored fat.
Finally, Section 5. Normal ketosis versus ketoacidosis, a critical distinction.
Let's move to and see how this builds a very clear, very serious clinical picture when we compare physiological ketosis with diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. Look at the root cause here. Normal ketosis is triggered by fasting, but DKA is caused by an absolute lack of insulin, which we usually see in type 1 diabetes. In normal fasting, sure, insulin is low, but it is still present, and that tiny bit of insulin acts like a speed limit, keeping ketone production totally under control. Blood BHB stays between 0.5 and 7 millimoles per liter, and blood pH remains perfectly normal. But in DKA? Because there is literally zero insulin, the system completely loses its brakes. Fat breakdown skyrockets. The liver is just flooded. Blood ketones surge wildly above 8 to 10 millimoles, and as a result, blood pH drops below 7.30. The blood becomes dangerously acidic.
The source text makes this distinction perfectly clear. When insulin is present to regulate the system, this whole process is entirely safe. As it states right here, during fasting or a ketogenic diet, ketone production represents a normal metabolic adaptation. It's a brilliant evolutionary survival strategy our bodies developed over millions of years to keep us alive during times of famine. It is working exactly as designed.
So, the crucial point is that context dictates everything. Unregulated, excessive ketone production, simply because the body lacks the insulin required to apply the brakes, is pathological. Diabetic ketoacidosis is not an adaptation. It is a life-threatening disease state that requires immediate emergency medical treatment. It's the exact same biological machinery, just without the vital regulatory hormones to keep it from running totally out of control.
And that brings us to the end of our journey today. We've seen how our body brilliantly adapts to starvation by turning stored fat into specialized brain fuel, all managed by this incredibly delicate balance of insulin and glucagon. It really forces us to ask, how does understanding these ancient backup generators help us draw the vital line between a brilliantly evolved metabolic adaptation and a dangerous medical emergency? Ultimately, the answer lies in the incredible nuance of human metabolism. Thank you so much for exploring this explainer with me today.